right, guys. Well, I have 6:30. I'm gonna keep an eye on the participants in case anybody else joins us. But welcome to our Grassmaster Spotlight series. So we do these quarterly, kind of just to give you a little history. It came to be because the Forage team was doing the Grassmaster series. And, it's really more of an overview. And so we had interest in a lot of other topics or delving deeper into some other topics. And so we decided to start, this kind of webinar series to be able to delve into those topics and also to present some timely information. So we were able to really seasonally hit some of those topics as well. So my name is Carol Knight. I'm on the Forage Extension team for UGA. I'm the agent in Madison County. We do have some other Forage team members on tonight. Roger Gates is on. Roger is in Whitfield County. We also have Jeremy Kickler on, who is in Colquitt County. So we've got every spectrum of the state covered tonight. And we are very pleased to have joining us this evening, Sam Ingram, who used to be a Forage team member back in the day when he worked for UGA Extension. And so he has since then furthered his education and changed careers and now works for Corteva Agriscience. And we are very pleased to have him joining us this evening to talk about, some of their products and some herbicide options with them.
Could you say that again?
Oh, Siri's trying to bust in there. Nice. Okay. So with that, I guess, Dr. Baxter, do you have any announcements, I guess, from your end that you'd like to share with her? We also have Dr. Lisa Baxter, our UGA Forage Extension Specialist, on the call with us tonight. So please, if as we go along, if you have any questions, please, feel free to put those in the chat, or Sam can stop, periodically, and we can have some discussion. Of course, the most important question everybody has is, how do I get my pesticide credits, right? So towards the end, Lisa is going to put a link in the chat box to a survey, basically, that says, one, how are we doing? But the other question is, it's going to ask for your name and address and your pesticide license number, so we can be sure to get you those credits. If you have problems with that link, my email was on the response that you got. Feel free to drop me an email. We can either get you the link or I'll be sure to collect your pesticide information so that we have those. Jeremy, CC, certified crop advisor. I didn't get those. I guess I can. I just did pesticide and commercial and private on the pesticide line. But okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sam.
Perfect. Thank you, Carol. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. Okay, I'm getting ahead now. Awesome. Let me share my screen and we'll get started. All right, so am I in slideshow, Carol? Good. Okay, thanks. All right, everyone. Again, my name is Sam Ingram. I am a field scientist for Corteva Agriscience. Many of you will not recognize this name probably, but Dow AgriSciences, that's our old heritage company. Dow DuPont merged, spun off this company, Corteva. A lot of the products that you use in range and pasture, we still have those in our portfolio. Like Grazon Next, Grazon P plus D, Remedy, those type of herbicides. So that's all what we do. So Corteva Agriscience. So I'm a field scientist covering the eastern U.S., technically from Michigan all the way down to Alabama, go east. That's my territory. I do all field research. So any herbicides that we feel are of value that we want to see coming out of the greenhouse, I'll put them out in the field and see how those test. So I'm able to get a good look at a lot of the weeds that that you all deal with right there in the field. A lot of times I work on farm with many of you private landowners on weeds that give us trouble to see how we can better our forages. So tonight I want to talk about emerging opportunities with herbicides. And, to be honest, some of these things have been out for a little while, but there's not been a whole lot in the range and pasture space. Really, for range and pasture folks, we usually get secondhand from cereals or row crops or whatever have you. We take those technologies, those compounds, and make them fit into the range and pasture space a lot of times. So we're getting some of those coming over, and a few exciting opportunities that I'll share with you all. To dive a little deeper, Carol let you all know that I was at one time a county agent. So I was in Jackson County for 3 years. So that's northeast Georgia. And then I moved down to southeast Georgia, was in Effingham for almost 2 years. Carol and I were neighbors. She was in Bullock. She lived in Scriven, worked in Bullock. So we were right there around each other. Went up to NC State, finished up my education, then came back down here in Savannah. I left myself out because you can see me, but on the right-hand side is my wife, her parents, and our 2 boys. So St. Patrick's Day is a big deal down here in Savannah. So we just had that whole experience with a parade float. So originally I'm from Rome, Georgia. You can see that there, raised on a small cow-calf operation. Saw somebody was from Floyd County. Keith's on the call. So I know Keith well too. Spend some time up there, have plots up there. So get up there pretty often. But now I'm in Savannah covering a lot of this area. So before we dive into what herbicide options you have in the range and pasture space, what I really like to lay a foundation on is one, there's no silver bullet with a herbicide option. They're a tool in the toolbox. So that might seem odd coming from a guy who works for a herbicide company, but really, the foundation with a lot of these concepts that we bring out to market, really the foundation can still come back to overall forage management and what we're trying to do with our forages to capitalize, to move the competition needle in their favor versus those unwanted plants. And one of the basics is soil fertility. So either in a range and pasture, for us it'd be pasture space on the eastern coast, but in the pasture, soil fertility is still a huge deal. We have nutrient cycling with those animals depositing manure and urine back in that. Soil fertility is still a huge key there. But for absolute certain, with a hay field, when we're removing that hay crop on the right-hand side, you can see, and you've probably all heard this if you sat in an extension meeting, you're literally taking nutrients off that ground and moving them to another place. So fertility is absolutely critical on a hay field. And when I start talking about impregnated fertilizer later on, that's where I tie in the soil fertility with the weed management strategy as well. So although we're going to talk about herbicides, I wanted to make sure that we all knew, fertility is a huge component of this too, because if we're out there spraying year after year and we're not maintaining our nutrients in the soil, then that's probably good for us in the short term selling herbicides, but really I don't want those pastures crashing for you either, obviously, because that just turns into a big headache. And on the other side of that, obviously, this is a weed talk. Weed management is critical. When I talked about moving that competition needle to the forage side, and that's all really we want to do is remove those unwanted plants. Yes, some of them do have high quality as far as nutrient value, but maybe they don't produce the tonnage. They definitely don't produce the tonnage of our improved varieties that we actually put the money into to establish there. Sometimes we have toxins or poisonous plants that can cause issues with our livestock. So when we move that competition needle, our herbicide application, what we like to say, you remove a pound of grass, or remove a pound of weeds, excuse me, you're going to at least get a pound to a pound and a half of grass in response to that herbicide application. And this photo, actually taken in Brazil on one of our internal plots, is just a really good visual to show you, with a herbicide application on the left and the tonnage response you get there with that grass, no herbicide application on the right. You can see the weed pressure that we removed, release that grass, has less competition for nutrients, moisture, and really the advantage shifts over to that improved variety, the improved forage variety. All right, so that's the foundation. Now we'll move over into what we have as far as options from Corteva. So there's other options out there, obviously. And if you and I are talking one-on-one on the farm, the same goes for our territory managers. So we have a good group of territory managers. Many of you probably would work closer with them or the retailer than myself. But, if I were to visit your farm, we wouldn't focus just in on what herbicide options Corteva has for you. The county agent and me, just like Carol and others on this call, is if we don't have an option for you, and I know there's somebody else, even a competitor, then I will absolutely provide that option to you. Now, I'm not going to give you names and phone numbers and get all that, because I usually don't have those. But if there's other options out there, we can provide them. So if you have a certain weed species that we might not talk about tonight, it's not to say that you don't have options to control it. We just might not cover it in our portfolio. But that's something where the county agent ties in too, to give you those. All right, so enough on that spiel. Duracore, it's been out for a while, but it is technically a newer herbicide because it's powered by Rinskor, which is a synthetic auxin. It's the first new herbicide to come to the range and pasture market in nearly 15 years. So it's powered by Rinskor, synthetic auxin. You think about similarities to like 2,4-D. So really what Duracore is you think about Grazon Next. The backbone of Grazon Next is aminopyrrolide. That gives you that residual component. That same residual component, aminopyrrolide, is in Duracore. So the foundation of, say, Duracore and Grazon Next are the same. The only difference is the auxin types, 2,4-D versus Rinskor. Very similar in their activities. The differences I would point out is we have a broader spectrum with the Duracore on things like plantain species, some of like poison hemlock, a little bit broader spectrum on those, and our use rates are lower. Whereas we're going, say, with a 24-ounce rate of Grazon Next, a lot of times we can go to 12 to 16 ounces on Duracore. So that use rate is definitely lower. So those are some of the differences. One of the questions we get asked a lot, what's the difference between Grazon Next? What is Duracore? And what's the difference between it and Grazon Next? Very similar in their foundation with that residual component. It's really those auxins that make them a little bit different. So again, powered by Rinskor, you'll see that on there. One that we're getting more folks accustomed to out in the field. You'll see it a lot in the retail space, one that we're very excited about to have out there in the market. Next, this is another one that, to be honest, I've heard about a lot. And when I came on almost 2 years ago, I heard a lot about it with ProClova, and it's taken a little bit of time. So anybody familiar on the call with ProClova and how long it's taken to get out to market, I'd imagine there's some built-up anticipation. We know that pump is primed, and hopefully, if I were to take a guess, which I'm not good at guessing or betting, that we should have federal registration by the end of this year and really start rolling out ProClova in the spring of 2023 to get federal registration, then move into state registrations. And that works well because, for those who don't know, ProClova is a herbicide that would be safe on white clover and annual Lespedeza in pastures. So really, that timing, we want to make that application where I'm at, we're going to make it somewhere between now and we can move it into a few more months, depending on what weed species we want to go after. But you can see some of the check boxes here, what you would want to pull out from the main points on ProClova. One, obviously, the big thing, safe on white clovering and Westphadia. This is a non-residual option. So when we're talking about Duracore and Grazon Next, it has that residual component, which can be definitely a good thing. But for those who don't want the residue in, say, their hay, or they want the flexibility of transitioning that permanent grass to something else, ProClova could be that option. So it's a nice non-residual option for you. The two components in it are one, Rinskor, which we just talked about, and then 2,4-D. So that formulated product is 2,4-D plus Rinskor. So we get a broader spectrum than what you would see with, say, a 2,4-D alone when we bring in that Rinskor. No grazing restrictions, obviously minimal hay restrictions. When we look at that label, it should be pretty flexible for a lot of folks, depending on their situation. So once we get label, what we want to look at is our use rate, kind of what we should see as expectations on control, what we can do in a given year, and adjuvants. So all those things are pointed out on this slide. We're going to be likely recommending a 24-ounce rate for a single application. You can go up to 48 in a year, but 24 should get us what we need on a lot of our weeds we're going after with ProClova. Now we do want to have an MSO in here, a pure MSO. So those that are not as familiar with adjuvant types or whatever have you, you have an NIS, non-ionic surfactant, you have some blend types, and then you have a true methylated seed oil. So for us, we feel it's critical to have that MSO component in there, 1% volume per volume with this application to get the control we're wanting to see. And as you get down the road, we can, in the next year, looking to make this application, we can talk about that with our retailers or our territory managers. And then far right-hand side, you can see the weeds we need to control. So, biennial thistle species, you can see on here, buttercup, looking at some of those. A lot of our winter annuals are starting to play out, but you can see those on here too. And then the wild carrots, poison hemlock, the plantain species, that Rinskor component, really picking those up there. This is not all encompassing, this is something we pulled out. Okay, so if you're taking notes, you heard I would say safe on white clover, tolerant. White clover is tolerant to this application. And this is one thing, we're trying to set expectations on what that application will look like to a white clover species. So you can see here, we'll start top left, day of application. One thing I would like to point out is majority of our applications will go on a mixed stand of clover and grass. This application was made on pure clover, obviously on purpose to show that response. So it might not be as dramatic as what we're seeing on this slide, but we definitely see some of the symptomology that we see on this slide in the field. That clover will bounce back. But it is something we need to make sure everybody is on the same page. And we understand once we get it out, we start getting it out on thousands of acres, that we're going to get some calls on this response. However, the clover does bounce back. So day of application here on our left-hand side, 24-ounce rate with 1% volume per volume MSO in a pure stand. You can see this 10-foot boom pattern right here. So after 7 days, we have laid that clover over. It is lodging. There's probably some chlorosis there. We've knocked all the blooms off. This 1 to 2 week application is the absolute low point. Okay, so going to 2 weeks, still lodged, still laid over. We can see coming into week 3, coming into week 3, clover starts coming back. Still don't have the blooms there. Moving into week 4 and 5, that clover's back, and we have those blooms come back, growth is back. So it does, the clover, I mean, it metabolizes it, but obviously there's some symptomology there. But the value of that ProClova application, still maintaining that clover, getting good weed control, is one we're really excited about for folks that want to maintain their white clover. All right, any questions on Duracore or ProClova before I move into impregnated fertilizer?
So Sam, there is
hearing none. This is
wait, stop.
Go ahead.
So you did have a question in the chat. Says, what's the activity of ProClova on perennial Lespedeza?
Yeah. Hey, Roger. To be honest, on this side, I think we would be fine on perennial. Are you talking about from a control standpoint, Roger?
Is it going to damage the perennial Lespedeza?
I don't believe it will, Roger. I have not personally seen it on perennial, but yeah, we should be fine on it.
Thanks.
All right, we'll move over into, yeah, you bet. We'll move over to our impregnated fertilizer. So those that are familiar with DFI or fertilizer that is impregnated with herbicide, we've been doing this for a while. Now we have a branded product. We call it Ultigraze, and that's the little sticker you see there, Ultigraze pasture weed and feed. One of the things that we're working with our retailers to have a branded product that is consistent and the quality is there as far as weed control and the fertility that you get out of this DFI product. So one of the things you'll be seeing more and more of is Ultigraze, which is just our brand of impregnated fertilizer. So this one we'll dive in a little deeper to, let me stop, back up here. Jeremy Kickler asked a question, how injurious is ProClova to crimson? It'll smoke it. We're not, so if we go back to here, let me just point out, ProClova is only for white clover and annual Lespedeza. Absolutely, we are looking at different types of legumes and how we can improve forage quality, taking out weeds with other legumes. But right now, as ProClova is to come to the market, we're only saying white clover and annual Lespedeza. Now, even with that said, and it being on, go ahead.
I've used Duracore for two years now. When is the ideal time to spray Duracore for plantain?
When, sorry, where are you located in the state?
In Carroll County, West Georgia.
Okay, yeah, sure. Well, it depends on, have you had good success with those last two applications? It sounds like you might have missed it.
Well, I sprayed earlier last year than I did this year. Last year was better, but I was just wondering, would it be better to spray in the fall? Because I have plantain and I got purple dead nettle like crazy. I talked to Clay Williams,
yeah.
and he told me to add some dicamba for my purple dead nettle, but I couldn't find any dicamba.
So I will tell you that a fall application on plantain, you'll take care of it. With that rinse-core component in Duracore, you're going to smoke plantain. We've got a plot right outside of Griffin, so not too far from you, on a roadside with a rinse-core. It was heavy in plantain, and it is absolutely annihilated it. So a fall application will get it. Now, depending on when that other application that you made, I would say if it wasn't too overly mature, you would still get sufficient control on that on plantain because it is a specific to Rin score.
Yeah, I really like the Duracore. It's really good.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you're a fan of the product. That's one thing that that we definitely see, the plantain control, and you being up in Carroll County, the north side of the state. And we have issues down here with plantain somewhat, but northwest, northeast Georgia, plantain can be an issue for a lot of folks, and Duracore is head and shoulders above a lot of our other products in the market for plantain. And I'll point out too, I've got a slide in here on the DFI where I actually released some purple dead nettle. Sounds similar to what you did in Rome, Georgia this past fall with an application.
Yes, I found out that the purple dead nettle has to be controlled in the fall and not the spring.
Yeah, so if we look at purple dead nettle, henbit, and chickweed to some extent, once we get into the spring, and it's just like our other plants, many of you sat through some of our meetings on plant physiology, they get more mature, leaf develops. It's an annual plant. After it's put on a flower and seed, it's kind of done its job. It's tough. They're tougher to control as they mature. We want to go after young plants, actively growing plants. The majority of our portfolio are growth regulating herbicides. So what do we need for that? For it to be good on control, we need an actively growing plant. And with these annual weeds, as they get further along in their life cycle, they're not actively growing. When an annual plant puts on a seed, it's done its job. It's going to die off. What we want to do is come in there when it's actively growing, surprise it, have a herbicide come in and take it out. That's a harder issue. Waxy cuticles, adjuvants come into play there too. In general, as they get older, they're tougher to control. I like a fall application if we can get the right temperatures and we get it up for germination. And actually, we'll talk about DFI in the fall too. All right, so let's go into some detail on the impregnated fertilizer. One of the terms we use in here, several terms to be used across the herbicide industry, but DFI is one that you'll hear a lot. It's truly the process of impregnating the fertilizer, dry fertilizer impregnation. You'll hear it used. Duracore DFI, Grazon Next DFI. All it is putting herbicide on a fertilizer prill. So on the right-hand side, I got this little cartoon to show you. It's just as simple as, we have our blended fertilizer here, NP and K. What we do is simply coat that fertilizer with a herbicide, and that's it. A lot of times we use blue dye to show folks that it is actually impregnated with herbicide. So you'll see a lot of blue dye go out on those too. And our two products we use with this are Duracore, the one we talked about today, and then Grazon Next HL, one of our capstone products that a lot of you are familiar with. All right, so this here shows you, this is actually a Piedmont fertilizer over in Alabama, right outside of Auburn. This shows you the process that it goes through to actually blend the fertilizer. So on our far left-hand side where this gentleman's standing, that's where our different components for the blend comes into the hopper, goes up this belt into this blender here. So you can see this second photo. That's actually where the herbicide is applied. Does everybody see this spigot here with the herbicide going on to the fertilizer that goes into the blender? Then it's blended out for about 5 minutes, comes back out on another belt, goes on the truck. So if you can just see this little blue shower coming down on this far right picture, the third picture from the right, that's what the end product would look like. I had those on videos, but last time I did this, they messed up, so I wasn't even going to try it there. So let's talk about making DFI a success. First thing we'll start off with is use rates on Duracore. With both of these products, we're going to go max rate, either Duracore or Graze-on Next. So that'd be 20 ounces for Duracore and 32 ounces for Graze-on Next. And the reason why we do that is because with a DFI application, we're really relying on that aminopyrrolid portion of the herbicide. The other sticking point here is 200 to 250 pounds of dry fertilizer per acre. The reason for that last bullet point, the 200 and 250 pounds, is because we want uniform coverage across that acre. You know, if we skimp on the fertilizer amount of product, sometimes we can have issues with uniform coverage. We can see choppiness. We can see, or just not adequate coverage leads to inadequate, or inadequate coverage leads to inadequate control on that weed spectrum. So again, I'm a visual person. I like these cartoons. It helps me. So this is just a rough, very rough cartoon that shows you, you know, if we run a spreader truck across this very patchy grass, hopefully we'll get more grass to grow after the fertilizer comes into play. But you can see here what really is, we have one, uniformity on our coverage on this little square of forages, but two, a lot of these prills in this cartoon and in the real world are hitting the soil and not the grass. And that's where we rely on one, soil uptake, right? Because the aminopyrrolid portion of these herbicides really needs to come into play to take out the weeds. And then two, moisture is a big deal. So we need adequate rainfall. You see that last bullet point. These prills with herbicides on them are sitting on the soil surface waiting for rainfall to incorporate them in to the soil profile for root uptake for the herbicides. So that's a big point. The benefits here, I know I'm hitting you with a lot of it must be this. The benefits here are once you drive that fertilizer truck across the field, you've made a fertility application and you've taken care of your weeds. So you've combined traditionally two applications into one. And with Duracore and Graze-on Next, majority of the weeds that you're going to be going after, broadleaf weeds, we're going to control with this application. But I want to make sure, you know, this is not comparable to a foliar application because, one, we put the fertilizer on the soil. It takes time for it to get incorporated into the soil, root uptake. So it's not going to be as quick. If you're used to spraying 2,4-D or other broadleaf herbicides coming out of the field and already seeing symptomology, that's not going to be the case with this herbicide application. It is slower, just to lay the groundwork there. But the real benefits there are, you know, you combine two applications, one less pass across the pasture, and you're taking care of two things. So Connie, you asked, what is the fertilizer and amounts? That's up to you. So whatever, you know, say you're in Madison County and Carol takes a soil sample for you, or you bring a soil sample into Carol and she gives you a blended fertilizer at the co-op. You call the co-op and, you know, with what prices are. I don't know how much you want to get into it, but, you know, if you want to do a true blend, or if you only need a nitrogen, 3200, they can put that herbicide on that. If you were probably not low on phosphorus, but you needed potassium, they could put in potassium. Whatever that blend is that you come up with, as long as we're going out with 200 pounds of material at the minimum, we can impregnate that fertilizer and make that herbicide application.
Okay, so this is a special blend that you get from only co-ops offer this, or you can obviously tell we've never used impregnated fertilizer before. So I'm not aware of where we would try to price it or source it.
So I do have a slide on where our current retailers are in the state of Georgia, and then some of them are across the line. But any of your co-ops that are doing blended fertilizers that make those applications, technically they could set up the equipment to do DFI. Now let's go back, because you bring up a point that I want to make sure that everybody's aware of. This equipment here is dedicated to range and pasture. So folks that live in row crop areas, they're not going to use the same blending equipment for row crops as they would for the range and pasture on DFI, because, well, those crops are very sensitive to aminopyrrolate, and that could be a big issue. So this equipment and the application equipment is dedicated to range and pasture, so we don't have those issues with cotton, soybeans, whatever have you, alfalfa. When we talk about DFI, this is related to permanent pasture grasses that we traditionally go out with on Duracore and Graze on Next. So not everybody out there that sells fertilizer does DFI, but if they're set up for it with the blending equipment, they can absolutely make that application. All right, so weed spectrum that we need to look at. Again, we're relying heavily on that aminopyrrolate portion of the Duracore and Graze on Next. The 2,4-D Rinskor components of those two come into play somewhat. But I wanted to point out here, I use this stoplight image of green means go, yellow means caution, and we still get these two, but I just like to set expectations. And then red means it's a no-go. So the gentleman that was talking about buckhorn plantain or plantain species earlier, we would not make a DFI application if our main target was plantain species. That is because we're not getting enough of that Rinskor on the plantain to get effective control. So if you got issues in the green box, this is not all encompassing, but once I pulled out that we go after a good bit, then we're good on those. Timing on pigweed with DFI, we can get it. I've gotten it several times. It's just a timing issue. And I want to be upfront there that, we can get it. It just needs to be timed right. Horse nettle, I've seen great control on horse nettle with a DFI application, heavy suppression, and a lot of other instances. But I still have those in the caution box in the yellow. And then in the red, you see those four. We're not going to get dog fennel. We might see suppression, but I would never recommend it on dog fennel or plantain. Annual marsh elder, not a big one for us in the state of Georgia. And then Canada thistle being a perennial, we can get control of it in instances, but one that I want to steer clear of for a broad spectrum like DFI. All right, so let's look at some photos. Again, I'm very visual. I like to show photos over bar graphs and charts. So this is actually over in Alabama. So the photo I showed you of Piedmont Fertilizer, the blending equipment. This is where we went to make that application. On our left-hand side is a strong stand of buttercup. You can see the cows sprinkled in there, but that is a sea of yellow. 2 weeks later, this is Duracore with 20 ounces. And we're doing a jam up job on that buttercup. Really, if we have a field like this, there's other issues going on besides just weed control issues, that we probably need to have some conversations about. But for me, it was a great site for my studies, so I was happy to have it. All right, so Keith, this is in Floyd County. This is at my dad's place in a Bermuda grass hayfield that had some DOP come in. So this was put out this past fall. As you all know, it was very warm. So this was put out December 1. This is DOP here on the left, day of application, 28 days later. Duracore 20 ounces with this DFI, was doing a jam up job on the DOP. What you see here mixed in, some of the limitations, henbit. It will suppress henbit, but it's not going to get it. There's also speedwell in here. Not going to get that with a DFI application. That's one of those that we would come back with a foliar application to get that. All right, so I got a question on how well does the residual of Duracore affect pigweed? James, can you elaborate on that as far as the question there? If not, I'll take a swing at it. Hopefully I can answer it for you. So what I assume you're asking on the residual of Duracore affect pigweed. So if we get, 45 days worth of residual on it, we would be doing well with a pigweed species, either Grazon Next or Duracore. What I would recommend is go after pigweed after it's up, still a young plant, but let it germinate, come up, because it has such a wide window. Depending on where you're at in the state, I don't know exactly where you are. Window gets wider as you go further south for germination. So a lot of times we can get good control of pigweed, but if that application is made a little too early, we don't get the full flush. We get control of what's there. We get that residual component. Once that herbicide's half-life dies off, if we stay warm enough and we get more germination later on, then we can still get pigweed to come up. So that comes back to a timing thing for you there, James, on, all right, we get emergence, we get that first full flush or a heavy flush of that pigweed, get that species under control. We can still do that early emergent. Lay down the residual to control what's coming on later. And depending on where you're at in the state, that window, you should get good control of pigweed. Now, your second question, I need to spray now for thistle. Yeah, that's fine. What we like to do, the good thing is both Duracore and Grazon Next are very forgiving of timing on thistles. So this picture right here actually shows it. Really with thistles, we want to spray in the rosette stage. That is before they start bolting and elongating, putting on a flower, right? What we can do is take down big thistle with Duracore or Grazon Next, foliar or DFI. So here, this is in Tennessee, late in the May 24th, I believe this application was made. Either way, not a big deal. This is day of application. On our left-hand side, you can see we have buttercup, thistle, white clover here. That's also not seen is the horse nettle that is coming up. On our right-hand side, this is 45 days later. You can see here, I'll point out for you, James, this is plumeless thistle here, bolted, it's got a flower on it, really mature, still able to take that down. So on our right-hand side, I'm standing over the plot edge on this photo. So here to the left, this is our untreated check. Here to the right is inside of our plot. What you can see are these big thistles, biennial thistles, plumeless musk, bull thistle, those types. What is not well seen here is the buttercup. It's already played out by this point, but it's cleared out. And then not well seen here, but horse nettle is coming up here. So even though I talked about horse nettle being that yellow, caution, I don't know how some of you drive. Maybe you drive faster when you see yellow. But what this is meant is actually to slow you down. So although I have horse nettle in yellow, we did a jam up job of controlling horse nettle in comparison to the control here with a DFI application. We can do that several times, but for me, my conservative nature is one that I would set expectations on. Yeah, that's about all the points that I want to cover here. The grass response, you can't really see it on this plot edge because it's fescue going into a summer slump. But we did, if we make that application a little bit earlier on in the spring, we get a nice grass response for sure from fescue when we get that spring bump. This one was made a little bit later into the summer, so we don't see that big grass response.
Hey,
But
Sam,
still, great weed control on that. Hey, go ahead.
just a question. I mean, this is the control plot on the left that got the same amount of fertilizer just without the impregnated herbicides.
No, so this here is just this is untreated check that we're running besides. So no fertilizer here and no herbicide
Okay.
on our left-hand side. Now this picture here to our far left is just day of application. But as I was saying there, later on into the year, this is predominantly tall fescue. This is in Tennessee. We're not seeing as dramatic as that grass response that we would see probably earlier on in the year. All right, so as we're getting closer into the time, obviously I'm going to talk economics to bore you all to death, and these numbers have probably changed. But the only thing I want to point out here is, you take the number of whatever it's costing you today for a fertilizer app, and you take the price of a herbicide app. So you got 90 and 25, that's $115. When you put it out in DFI, what you're really saving is that extra application cost. So if you were to do these separate, and sometimes you do, depending on when you want to go out and fertilize or when you want to go out and attack weeds. But if we were to take them both at the same swipe, that's $13 over an acre. Now, depending on your farm size, that might not mean a lot to you. But as we grow in acres and we're making larger applications, those numbers start adding up. The other cost here that we're not seeing, we don't use a surfactant. Depending on what kind of surfactant you use, you're not going to have that in DFI as well. All right, so this is where we have DFI registered across the U.S., green states. That's where we have registration for DFI, and you see the numbers within those states. So the Midwest, we are pretty committed there, and we're growing in the Southeast. Break it down into where we're at here. You can see the north side of the state, we have some applicators, and we're trying to bring folks on here in the south. But I believe we have, well, that number said 7. Yeah, so 7 applicators across the state that can make that application for you. This is Ultigray's retail providers. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A few more of those folks, they haven't come online, but they're still there. So that's what gets us up to the 7. Our territory manager, Clay Williams, he has been in South Georgia this spring. And I will tell you, there's interest in getting DFI locations on board in South Georgia. One here in close to me in Metter. I believe they're going to be coming on board for DFI just because they see the value. There is some upfront costs for our retailers to invest in the equipment, the blending equipment and the application equipment, because it is dedicated to that range and pasture space. But once they see that value, once they get enough calls on it to say, hey, what is this DFI all about? Then they really start buying into it, and it's been a really big success for us. So with that, I think we have a few minutes for questions. Here's my phone number, email, reach out to me. Happy to speak with any of you, or I know a lot of the county agents that you all work with, so happy to work with them if I'm coming through, or we need to come out to your farm if you're having issues with some of our products. Clay and I are happy to talk with you. That's one of the things that I still enjoy. I enjoy that I still get to do in this position, is get out on farm and meet with a lot of you. So thanks for your time and attention. I'll take questions if there are any.
Anybody have any questions? And it doesn't necessarily have to be about Corteva products. I mean, we have some Forage team members and Dr. Baxter on with us. If we can try to answer any other weed control questions or forage questions that you have right now. You'll notice if you'll go to your chat box, Dr. Baxter just posted the link to the survey.
Yeah, it actually didn't add the last question about the pesticide number, but if you can put it in the text box for the spotlights, the ideas for upcoming presentations. We can
so-
separate it.
Yeah,
I don't
if
know
you'll-
where it went, but it's not there anymore.
Okay, well, in the free text at the bottom where it asks if you have other ideas, please share your ideas with us, but also include your name and address and your pesticide license number if you have that. Oh, we do have a question in the chat. What do you recommend for sweet gum and persimmon? Oh, so we got some trees, obviously, or seedling trees. Lisa,
Yeah.
do you,
So
or Sam?
James, where are you located? If you're able to talk or put it in the chat. And then I'll ask you, are you looking to go after them broadcast? Or are you looking to go after these with IPT, which is individual plant treatment, where you would actually spray it with a handgun?
He's in Morgan County.
Morgan County. Okay, broadcast. Yeah, so one, sweet gum is obviously a prolific resprouter. Persimmon, not so bad, but and it's going to be tougher with a broadcast application because it's going to be rate sensitive. What I would say, well, let me read into. Okay, I thought you had more on the question. Depending on what you're located close to, James, one of the products, obviously we're going to use some triclopyr. So in the range and pasture space, our product is Remedy Ultra. So triclopyr, say at a 16 ounce rate, somewhere around there. And then another product that is good for sweet gum specifically, Duracore is also well. So for general brush, I always like saying Duracore at 16, Remedy at 16. It's just easy to remember 16 plus 16. Now you might have to bring in some aminocyclopyr or method that helps with that sweet gum. With persimmon, I feel like we'd get it with Duracore and the Remedy alone. But depending on how heavy your infestation is, what kind of coverage you're going to get, those are all particulars. Persimmon is going to be easier to control than the sweet gum. What you want to wait for, James, is full leaf out. Don't go at it too early. So really, we make these brush applications, I'm considering sweet gum and persimmon brush, later into the fall. So not too late into the fall when sweet gum starts dying on you, the leaf starts crumbling up, you get brown spots on it. We want a nice leaf. We want full leaf because we want that herbicide to take that, we want that herbicide to be taken in by the plant. So we want all the leaves out. And we want a good leaf for it to translocate. All right, because if we do it too early and that plant's still putting on leaves, it's not going to take in that herbicide effectively. If you want to, shoot me an email or text with that number right there, James, and give me more specifics on that, because Clay and I, we can talk you through that application. And depending on where your site is in Morgan County, we might be able to get together with you in person. All right, so Connie had a question. Rain created a lot of buttonweed near our creeks. Is there a pre-emergent we can use this all the season? Getting this again, create a mess in our hay because it does not dry. Yeah, so Connie, is it Virginia buttonweed? As far as the low-growing, prostrate in nature, the one that we see a lot in turf, that you have the issue with?
Yeah, we'd never had it before, and I just attributed it to all the rain that we had last year because it was in areas that hold a lot of water, which tend to be near the creek on our property. So it was just like a flat carpet, and then it obviously got mixed in with some of the hay, but it didn't dry at all. And it just made those bells, I mean, we couldn't even sell them. The moisture content was so high. That and the spiny amaranth were both horrible for us this year. And I don't know if they're both related to the iron. We used Satellite HydroPro last year as a pre-emergent because we have foxtail. And then we use Grazon Next is what we use for actively, growing weeds that we're trying to get rid of.
Yeah, so to be honest with you, Connie, I haven't had much dealing with buttonweed in a pasture space because that's usually a turf weed that I just haven't dealt with a lot. If I had to take a guess, it would be sensitive to aminopyrrolid. But I can't say that with confidence because I just haven't had any dealings with it. We'd have to look into what
it came on at the, at the end of the season for that third cutting. But now I'm just afraid that I've got a massive amount of seed out there, but it may be a problem again this year.
More than likely it is because it's a prolific seed producer. I know that I have had personal dealings with it. I've got it in my front yard, but we don't have anything labeled within our pasture portfolio to spray in my yard. I've hit it with MSM, metsulfuron, and it knocks it back, but it doesn't control it.
Yeah,
so
we
I'd have to
used
get
some
back to you on the Virginia
MSM
buck
last
nettle.
year for horse net or for dead nettle. We used some MSM, and that's probably what I'll use again this year is some MSM and hit with the Grazon and we did Resilon this year for our pre-emergent, so I don't know if it'll have any effect on it or not.
To be honest, I don't know as far as Resilon with the size of that seed. Possibly, I haven't looked into what all they have on that portfolio. But being manual, I mean, you might get some control on it for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? Well, before we turn everybody loose, if you had problems with the Quatrix link, like I said, reach out to me. We'll get you your information that you need to make sure we record that. Dr. Baxter, do you have any events or any announcements before we turn everybody loose?
We don't have anything set in stone yet. Got a lot of stuff in the pipeline, starting to think about getting planned for this summer. So keep an eye out on our social media and through your county agents.
Awesome. Well, and again, be sure to share with us, if there are topics, that you'd like to see us feature on these spotlight series, please share those with us because we'll do our best to try to make that happen. Our next one will be scheduled sometime in the summer, usually in June-ish for this. But with that, Sam, we really appreciate you joining us this evening.
Yes, thank y'all for having me. I appreciate it. I enjoy these kind of talks. Hopefully everybody got something out of it. And hopefully, oh man, I'm sharing something else now. Hopefully everybody got something out of it. Please feel free to reach out to me.
All right. Thank you, guys. Y'all have a nice evening.